Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and engaging conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Maestro Bob Nance, the president and founding artistic director for Heartland Sings. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So before we dive a little bit into Heartland Sings and its 25 years, I want to start with a little bit about your background in general. And I found a quote that I think really, as I have gotten to know you over the years, that you said that you really, I think, epitomes everything that you do. And you said, a creative endeavor is a risky adventure.
It's one of my favorite sayings, and I wrote it myself.
Right. And I think it really shows that, so in, the last, let's say, 25 years, you launched Heartland Sings, you created Heartland Productions, and now you're going to be launching a very exciting new endeavor where you are going to make we're calling it a performance RV, where you're going to literally bring the arts and music to people where they are. So, but before we talk specifics on these, I want to talk to you about your role as a founder of an arts organization. So how much of your time is it spent on raising money, grant writing, glad handing the community important leaders? How much of what you do is that versus why the work that you would do because of the reason you started the organization in the first place?
Well, let's go back to that saying, a creative endeavor is a risky adventure. I have never had an opportunity presented to me where somebody said, Bob, we want you to play or conduct or do this concert, and we're going to just hire you to do this. I've had to do it myself all the way. I've coined another phrase that goes along with that, which is together we make art happen, because I'm also I understand enough about how the arts are communal, and there is no way I could do anything I have ever done in a vacuum by myself.
Right.
I mean, you can, I suppose, but it's sort of limited, right? Because it's communal, the arts, you want to engage everybody you can to come to the table, and appreciate what you're doing and maybe participate in some fashion.
Okay.
So what I found, though, is that as you ask people to join you, sometimes they can say no. And it can also be somewhat disheartening as an artist because, first of all, when you perform, what's the scariest thing? That people might hate what you've done.
Right.
So that's a perfect reason to remember that a creative endeavor is risky. You risk your own heart when you perform.
Right.
And
especially if it's something that you created.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and then when you're asking, say, donors or community leaders to invest their time and energy to help you get something done, they can also reject that. So again, every time you put an idea out there, it's a big risk. So whether it's passion of mine or something I think is good for the community, when I've taken this, I've tried to remember that it's a risk and that people can say no, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But that's really just been indicative of my entire life. Right. And the saying helped me cope with the circumstance of knowing that no matter what I do, whatever step I take, there's going to be a risk involved, either financial or emotional or just physically, because you can only do so much.
But you don't think that being a performer yourself and being on stage, that you sort of have toughened up to rejection or people saying no, or does it still?
At this point in my life, absolutely.
Okay.
But I just needed to come to some peace within myself as I, began. This is well prior to my starting Heartland Sings, because I was producing and doing other things on my own even prior to that.
Right.
But one of the big concerns is always the rejection and how it makes you feel and how that can be very limiting in your work ahead.
But I also think that through some of the things that you're doing, you really have brought a true creative approach to innovation. And one of the things that I think you and I have talked about, not at this table, at other tables, is this whole idea of the perception of nonprofits and how that they are perceived just because they're a nonprofit, that they're not a business and they shouldn't make money.
Yeah.
And really, when you're a nonprofit, that's really just for tax purposes. So I really want you to talk about this idea of how you think about nonprofit arts in terms of being profitable in order to be sustainable.
Well, this requires a story.
Okay.
So pull up your cocktail.
Okay.
Here we go. So when I started Heartland Sings, I was already in the company of some pretty significant leaders in the country over like the choral arts. And at the time, when we were starting Heartland, we were looking to start a paid chorus, if you will.
Professional.
A profession. Well, if you're paid, that's the definition. When you're paying a group of singers, that puts them in that professional category.
Okay.
And there are standards and things you look at. So we were looking at something that was already innovative in Fort Wayne because we didn't have any paid singers, right? Apart from soloists that we would bring from outside
and
Fort Wayne.
Are there, when you were looking at this for Fort Wayne, was there other
examples
groups?
of that?
Yes,
Of course. I mean,
okay.
this whole country, the whole idea of the traveling chorus came from Robert Shaw and Robert Page and, and the like. The Pennsylvanians and Fred Waring, all of those folks. Yeah,
Okay.
they set the stage, and these were paid professionals who toured, and so why didn't we have one here? We had a professional symphony.
We have a professional ballet.
Well, not at the time.
Oh, okay.
25 years
Sorry.
ago, we didn't.
Okay.
So when I came to town, I was hired as the minister of music at First Presbyterian Church. I was already in town for 7 years, and I saw a huge. I guess it just was not fair. But you had this understanding in the community that if you had an instrument in front of you, either piano or whatever, that somehow paying for that service made sense to people. But to pay a singer for whom their instrument is internal and not visible necessarily, couldn't they just do it? So I was in a position of hiring singers to do services or to do some sort of, whatever, a wedding, funeral, great choral work or something like that. And when you put to the client, maybe the family who was going to pay for this, that you would have to pay for that singer, they're like, why? They will pay thousands of dollars for flowers, they'll pay thousands of dollars for an instrumentalist, they'll pay me as a keyboardist to play for that and pay well. But the singer, no, not so. So really singers as a profession, vocalists, are about 75 years behind those in the instrumental world, but they get the same education, they have to go to the same schools, they pay the same tuition, but the job opportunities are pretty nil. And so, like I said, in this company of professionals that I was dealing with, we were already in conversations that what's the answer? The answer is to make sure that you have professionals and amateurs coexisting in any community. And for me, it was a justice issue. When I started Heartland Sings, it was like, we have to have paid professionals who can earn a living in this community as vocal artists, because look at all the singers we have in this town. That's 10 times larger than any instrumental activity. And in fact, it rivals even baseball, if you look at it in terms of extracurricular activities for folks. So
there's lots of different types of choral groups.
Absolutely. And singing groups. So there's a great need for professional training, and it can't all be done at the university level. You need to have professional singers teaching in home studios and things like that. So that was what launched the idea, was that we needed to be able to prove to the community that paying for professional singers was of value. And it took a few years to get into that. Now, as I was building that and building the case for paying singers, that's when I was faced head on with this understanding that a nonprofit wasn't supposed to make a profit. And I said, you're kidding, right? So I realized that even at the leadership level, the folks that I was dealing with, donors and board members, that an understanding that a nonprofit company still has to make money. But the more money it makes, the more services it can provide.
Or the less it has to be worried every year that it's going to get a renewal of a grant
Well,
or get donations.
that's not even the point, because any business that doesn't make money
it's not a business.
is not a business,
Right.
right? And so, if I give somebody $10,000 to do something as a nonprofit, I want them to spend that money doing the service.
Right.
I don't want it to go to back payments for
Right.
stuff for mismanagement or anything like that. And any business that can't make a profit closes. That's the reality. So you need to at least show that your company, at least as a nonprofit, has a balances of services that need to be supported through philanthropy, but we're vocal artists. We can entertain. There's no reason to say to a client that we're just going to do this for free and hope you make a nice donation. No, we need to understand that our philharmonic, our instrumentalists, all of our professional musicians in this town have bills to pay.
Right.
If you want them to be here and support the culture in Fort Wayne, and see, that's another thing. We can go into that. We're going to get into that. But that's what really got Heartland started, was this justice issue about we have paid musicians in town, and they are all but half of the musicians in the town were not being paid and not respected as professionals for that.
So the mission of Heartland Sings was really changing lives through song, but the idea of fostering the appreciation for the vocal music.
Yes. Now that byline came about 5 years into this work of the company.
Okay.
When we got started, that was my mission. My passion was to prove that we could actually pay singers, that would improve the quality and provide a professional face for vocal music in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
And also challenge all of our, give an opportunity to challenge the art form. Okay. And that's what professionals do. Professionals make it their passion to challenge and create and make the art form continue into the future. Amateurs do the same good work, but their job is to be inspired by that.
Well, it's not their livelihood.
It's not their livelihood, but they still achieve the same end. Okay.
So before we continue that road, but I also want to, you've talked about that. First of all, I want to understand, because you major in, think of yourself as a keyboardist.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand, is the only difference between a keyboardist and pianist is that you play something that's plugged in versus, or what is the difference really?
A keyboardist is broader because I can play piano, harpsichord,
Oh,
organ.
okay.
So, and yes, I can play those instruments that are plugged in, right? Digital instruments and other things like that. So, yeah, that's the only thing. So it depends. If I'm just doing a piano concert, I might
well, that was my first question. Now, you actually at Heartland Sings, you also teach piano and vocal, because you said that you need to learn how to be a good accompanist. So I'm curious, how do you define a good accompanist? And the reason that I'm asking you is because, we talk about everybody how to be a good leader, but not everybody can be the leader. So we also need good followers. So I'm curious
Well, okay, now you've just tapped into something that's important for all leaders that might be tuning into this.
Well, that was going to be my next.
Well, I know. So I've got to get off my chest. A good leader is a follower. Because you need to set the tone, but you also need to allow the people that you're leading to, take the reins.
Right. Okay.
And so there is a case to be made that in a creative environment that it's somewhat collective, but somebody does take the lead.
Okay.
And in music, that's very much a music metaphor too, because when I'm playing at the keyboard, I'm following the lead of whoever I'm playing with.
Right.
Right. I don't play for somebody in a rehearsal. I'm playing with them. And because we're making, really the amalgam is the music that needs to come alive.
Okay.
So I don't play for them, or I don't lead them to do whatever. We negotiate that, and sometimes on the fly, right in the middle of the performance.
Right.
So that's what helped me, I think, learning that as a good accompanist.
Right.
Helped me become the leader that I am, because it is always a negotiation. And, to be that free and open about your leadership and your willingness to bend and to consider a wide variety of opinions is what helps to move a company along in a positive way.
And I think another thing that you've learned also would make a good leader, which is what makes a good conductor.
Same thing. It's absolutely the same
But don't you also have to be a conductor? I always think I don't know how you all learn the moves, but don't you also have to be able to see the whole field and see sort of like maybe somebody's getting a little head, and you've got to be able to like keep all of that in mind. And then with like singers and who's not coming in, and like I know we did we taped a performance a couple weeks ago for Yom HaShoah, and there was even a time where it through the tech when they were doing the recording that the male voices were coming in louder than the female, and so like as a conductor you've got to be able to see that whole field. So don't you think that
because it was my group doing that thing.
But also you've got to get everybody to be on the same page, do the same thing at the same time. I mean, that's also a leader, right?
Right.
You've
but
got
that's part of your training.
Okay.
That's why you rehearse.
Okay.
So my group was rehearsed in advance of that recording session, and because they're professionals and well trained, they come pretty well prepared.
Right.
And we negotiate all of that to the point that when we're actually in performance, they really don't need me anymore. And
they need you to play the.
They did in this case but we have accompanists. I could have had somebody on that and it could have conducted, but it really was not necessary under that circumstance.
So does that also define? Do you think that translates to leadership? Is really being able to be a leader that you don't have to be there. You can step aside and believe that you've trained them and your people and they have it that they can.
I think the true measure of good leadership is that when you step away, that the company can still function.
Okay. But I also think that there's another element that you bring, and I think that defines leadership, which is Maestro, which is really a teacher.
That's correct.
So I think that, because what I'm really getting at is that people think that the arts are really, for entertainment purposes, but I think that just like they've proven that kids who are participating in music, any type of music, what they learn, the value of practice, hard work, preparation. Yeah. They've also found that helps with math skills. But I also believe that certain things that you do in these three areas of an accompanist, a conductor, and a teacher also help to translate to make what makes a good leader, regardless if it's a nonprofit arts or a for-profit business.
Yeah. Well, I don't see them as any different. I just see the clientele as different.
Okay.
So let's talk about Maestro.
Okay.
The reason I own that as a moniker, as a trademark, is just that. I mean, I come from a long line of teachers in my family, and I just have that gene. And I also learned as I was being trained at Peabody Conservatory as a conductor, that the instruments or the chorus, anybody who is in front of me to be led by me, I had to understand what they had to do to achieve what I envisioned to be the musical outcome.
So were you a singer, or were you?
I was trained. I mean, I started out at 9 years. Well, I was playing piano at 5, but I started out in a boy choir. That's where I got my training.
Okay.
In Williamsburg, Virginia, and I was in what amounted to be a Royal School of Church Music format, and all my basic training was in music came through my singing voice. Now, I'm not a professional singer. In fact, to direct singers, you don't necessarily have to be a professional singer, but you do have to understand what they do and how they accomplish it, and you have to understand everything about the instrument. That's what I learned as a conductor, that I'm playing these instruments vicariously through the players in negotiating some sort of mime or some connection that we make because we've rehearsed together, but then we're connecting on a level that first of all is very exciting when you can do that, not just because you're clever at how you mime that, but because you have that
connect. Well, it's also that preparation.
It's that human connection. Well,
but
there's
you
something.
You don't just get that. I mean, that's through preparation. That's through working together. That's through.
Yeah, but it's also there's a maturity of focus that comes with artists over time, and as you can actually connect people on an emotional. It's visceral. I mean, it's not just the visual. There is an emotional, spiritual connection that you have with musicians when you're really connected. And I find that to be the most true for me when I'm conducting or if I'm behind the piano with an ensemble of some kind, that you can actually communicate things. It's the most exciting thing for me is to sit down and play, and I'm just making up something, and then I'll be with my combo and my bassist, one of the best bassists on the planet, Brad Coons. He'll just start playing along. And I didn't have to tell him what he was going to do. I'm feeling it. I'm just doing something. And because we've played together for 30 years, it's just...
But isn't that the nature of jazz?
Well, it's the nature of music. Period. So anyway, I have to say that one of the things that I found in my consulting work is that I can actually work with a company executive on how to guide their team just by making them understand what I do as a conductor. In fact,
and also as a teacher.
Well, that's right. But for the most part, it's just how do you actually bring forces together and work with them to inspire them to do what they do.
And also to bring, I think that, and it's the role that the arts and music plays, is really bringing people who have diversity and different experiences and different, to come together and play as one and be in this sense of unity, right?
Right. Well, and you're tapping into one of the things that I think is still vastly misunderstood in our society today, is how music, just having that experience and making that such an important part of our educational process,
yes.
that what it does to people's psyches and how it makes them just function better
right.
in society. So we were part of a study, probably in the 5th year of development at Heartland Sings, where we were trying, this is where the byline Changing Lives Through Song came, because we wanted to know, is there really some sort of effect?
Oh no, they've proven
that, well, this is it. So we learned that singers, even if they're not professional, just anybody that has been a singer between the ages of 1st grade and say 8th grade, if they participated for any length of time in that they were 4 times more likely to do all the things that we consider good citizenry. They would vote, they volunteer, they donate, and they participate in community activities. So, these are people that feel the connection, and not only that, they understand diversity.
Okay, so you get them from that standpoint of participation, but I'm also talking about that there is the visceral that's been proven with the role that
music
and singing plays in our lives. Like they have found that with dementia patients, playing certain piece of music can jar memories. They actually have shown that listening to music and uplifts moods. I mean, I can hear a certain song, and it will take me back to a very, I sort of associate them with boyfriends, a very specific.
I know, I got you there. Let's back up. So, this idea of connecting and understanding what that is, if you take it out of the educational process, people still feel that, but they don't know why.
Right.
And this is the key. If you're not experiencing it and verbalizing it and putting some experiential definitions on what it means,
right.
then you don't really understand why. It's like people understand, I like this music, but I don't know why. But defining it gets you deeper into that, who you are as a human being and why this touches you. Right?
And this also parlays into your work as an arts advocate.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that we know that arts and music is so important in schools and with the values and what it teaches them and the outcomes, yet it's always the first thing that's cut. So, in school.
Well, that comes from sort of a surface understanding of the value of something like that. Like, well, do kids really need to have music to go get a job? Directly, no, but indirectly, it's a big capital yes. And the reason being is that I think about how really I've worked on multiple staff teams in my work, especially in churches or in university environments. And both in those two, the church situation and in the university environment, I've got singers and non-singers. And then when I work with a team of creatives who are all singers, I mean it's a different challenge because they already understand what it means to work together because that's their life's experience. And so honestly, none of it's easy to be a leader there,
right.
But that particular environment is tons easier.
Well, they say that that's the benefit of people who played on competitive sports teams, even if they were younger, because
they understand that
right,
they understand
right.
that
So,
group
but
dynamic.
Why do you think, with all the research and there's extensive research on the values that music and the arts play in our lives and in our children's lives and everybody and the quality of life?
I already know where you're going with that. The answer is we have far too many bottom line bean counters in charge of what's going on in the community, and they don't have that experience to rest their decision making on. So if you put somebody who's a good financial bean counter and has never sung in a choir or doesn't really understand that communal experience, I mean, that may be too pat, but I'm willing to bet that the folks who are making decisions where those kinds of cuts are made are making some very serious bottom line decisions without a complete set of experiential data to make good decisions there. And that's why, not every community cuts the arts.
Well, but no,
right?
but I'm even talking on a governmental level. When they want to cut,
Well, even
there
in
was a whole time,
schools.
well, PBS, they want to cut the National Endowment of the Arts, which is such a small part. But why do we still have to constantly make the argument of the value of the arts?
Well, I think, we've already made that case. It's just too many people are not, we haven't valued it for 2 generations right now. And I mean, at the educational level.
Right.
And that's part of it. Now, I can also say that administratively or structurally as companies, when nonprofit law came into place in the 60s, that's when we saw the arts lose their momentum in the public. Because the arts were seen, first of all, as needy, right? And just some place to park your, some assets so
Right.
that you didn't have to pay taxes on it or something like that. I mean, it was really just a clever way of saying, oh yeah, we're going to give money over here. So all it did was the for-profit arts accelerated. They continued to grow and develop. Of course, it was purely entertainment, but they continued to grow. Look, if you go to Broadway now, you're paying $225 for a cheap seat. But then in Fort Wayne, I can, if I'm selling a ticket and I can get $15 for that, I'm doing well, right? But I still then have a huge gap. And look at today. Why did we shutter all these venues because of COVID? We shuttered them because we could not fill the houses. Because even if you fill the house at the ticket prices right now for things like or nonprofit
Right.
arts,
Right.
you still can't charge enough because there's a perceived difference in value for those core arts. And that's all because of nonprofit law. The companies that were receiving donated dollars didn't have to pay attention to what the consumer wanted. They didn't. And so, that's been an effort that Heartland's been trying to work on now for the past, I'd say 7 years, is how can we really focus on earned income? Largely, I think we started this probably 20 years ago, but it's taken some time to get
Okay.
away from this idea that nonprofits don't have to make
Okay.
money. They do. They also, there's a balance between the philanthropy that we need
Right.
but the things we can do. So I think of big companies that have been very successful making money as a for-profit entity, and they spin off a foundation to do philanthropy work. So in our case, it's going to be what our philanthropists can do as a group of say a group of investors in a nonprofit that can say part of your focus needs to be on delivering services that people will pay for.
Okay.
And the most successful nonprofit in this country is the Red Cross, because they have the lowest payout for administrative services and the highest amount of dollars that go right
And
to the
also
services.
people see,
They know the value of that,
well,
right?
and also you can't miss anywhere you see the Red Cross. I mean, they're very good at the branding and marketing to show you.
But it's clearly understood.
Yes,
I mean, there's not a
absolutely.
single community in the country
Right.
that has not benefited from having
Right.
a Red Cross. So they understand what that is, and they reach a lot more people.
Okay, and then I
So-
think there's also the irony, when you look at that, now what's really become in the last really 10 years, the importance in communities to get people to move to a community or a company to move their headquarters or get people to stay is really what they call quality of place. And so one of the things that's always measured is the arts in the community. And so there's this idea that they want to have a rich arts community. Yet I find the irony of that is they're going to have a rich arts community, yet they don't pay these professional artists, and that whole idea of the acceptability of a starving artist. Like we would not have, the average base wage for those who claim artists as a principal profession, they make, as their principal profession, make under $17,000 a year, which is really below, for a single person.
In this town, it's poverty line.
Poverty level. So I just think, why is it that there's this disconnect between, and we also say, so I think this is very interesting, these economic terms, because we say we want an art-rich community, we want to enjoy the wealth of the arts, yet we have starving artists. So why is that, and how do we bridge that disconnect there?
Well, I think you've just outlined, at least from my advocacy standpoint, what I have been about for the past 25 years. So in addition to paying the singers, as when we started looking at going full time, where we were actually bringing career folks to Fort Wayne to live here, to practice their craft, and to contribute to sort of the artistic product of Heartland Sing. When we were looking at that, we began to realize, or at least I did, and began to speak pretty directly to folks that I know that perceive to be leaders in the arts community and our civic leaders, that we need to pay attention to the fact that we often say that there's a couple reasons that any company should move to Fort Wayne. And I've had this discussion with our mayor. So one, that we've got great infrastructure, right? We got wonderful arenas in town, and we good tax base, lots of growth and development, and top on the list for quality is good schools, good balance of public and the arts, right? And so I've done several of Mayor Henry's inaugural events where he states sort of his state of the city and the things that he thinks are a real plus. And the one that got my ire, but at least my attention, because I'm very positive about what the city's doing, and I really am a big supporter of Tom's. But what got my focus was his statement that Fort Wayne's an easy sell because our arts are so strong. And I said, I have a problem with that. And I'm able to talk to him about that. So I said, he said, well, what's the problem with that? I said, because that's true. I said, well, it is true. But the truth is that the average, really 90% of the artists that live in this town make half what you pay the trash collectors in Fort Wayne. So as a profession. So I thought that was kind of ironic that, we pay folks who really, we value infrastructure like trash collection and good water and all this sort of thing, and we pay for that. Right. But when businesses says, how are the arts and all that, and we looked at the frontline artists in this town, look who was largely affected by the pandemic. That's right, exactly. So, and that most of them live just above or right around the $17,000 poverty line. So do you? So what I'm saying is that the only way to change this is to begin the conversation that if a city really values the arts, and I'm going to give you one that does, really value the arts, then they talk about the quality of life for artists in that town and what needs to change to make it better. And they also make it so that because the other issue which we really saw with the pandemic for artists was also the fact that they are self-employed, which was a very big issue because then they weren't entitled to certain unemployment benefits. And the fact that because of the nature that we closed all these venues and stuff, that they couldn't even maintain basic needs. No. So but that's it. So until we have that discussion, and that we make it part of a community, folks, if the community really says that the reason we have brought all these wonderful businesses to town and that they're successful here is because of the arts in part, then somehow we need to have a good conversation about their quality of life. So Seattle. That's their commission is completely focused on that. It's a non-funded, it's funded, of course, from the taxation, but the commission is not paid. Their goal is to make sure that the diversity is covered, that artists' quality of life and opportunity is good, because they realize that if the arts are thriving in town, that it brings business. Well, don't you think it's also the same thing that everybody says they want local independent shops? And it's been proven that people come to a city, they don't want to go to the big box restaurants. They want to go to the independent little stores. They want to try the neighborhood restaurants. But if the people in the community do not support them by patronage, and they'll say, yes, I want a restaurant in my neighborhood, or I want a little shop, yet then they go to a chain restaurant and they shop from Amazon. So it's all the same thing, that they have to understand if they want these things, then you have to support them. Exactly. And the truth is, if we're having that conversation, then people become aware and they make those priorities. That's it. But if you don't talk about it, then it disappears and people just don't think about that. Well, and don't you think that, so one of the things that I noticed was that April 12th through the 19th is actually American for the Arts Advocacy Week. And so it's supposed to be a time where you advocate for the development of a vibrant community through the creative sector, and understand like the creative economy that pumps $22 billion a year into our United States economy. Yet
where is the communities? I haven't heard anything about programs, initiatives, or doing a value of the arts. There's no. So where is that because we have to educate.
I agree with you. At least in my life, that's 24/7.
Right. Okay.
Because I don't think I can limit my focus to American for the Arts 1 week focus time. Right.
Right. I do need to correct something. It's $22 billion in Indiana. It's actually $877 billion. In the United States.
Through the whole country.
Yes, I was off on my statistics. So
well, whatever. I mean, 80 trillion. I mean, there's a lot of business that's churned.
Well, and 400 million jobs in this country are based on the arts.
Right. And the very people that suffered the most were those folks. And it raised at least two issues for me. That everything that I've advocated for those folks came to the surface with COVID, but so did the national discussion about the minimum wage, right? So all of these things are there, and all we see is this increasing divide, and between the basic employer and or employee, right, across the country, are just kind of living from paycheck to paycheck. And food banks need to have more and more food.
Right.
I mean, at some point we need to make some change in our society to make it possible.
And do you think that because of the fact that all these venues are closed, and because you're not doing performances or any arts organizations, that people then we're losing our artists, like they're not staying here, so they're not because they have to go get a different job, so then they don't have time to be an amateur. Do you think that as a result of COVID, which I think just really sped up a lot of these issues and also brought them to the forefront, that we're actually losing our creative class? Or am I too pessimistic?
That might be a little too gloom and doom.
Okay.
Because, to be honest, I mean, the creatives I know have been very creative about what they have done.
And they talked about, but I did have an issue about this where they partly, Arts United had an initiative, and it was sort of that they gave money not only for the basic needs and stuff, but also these funds for reimagining your artistic practice and sort of how you can, provide. But my interesting thing was that we had to do that for artists, yet we didn't do that like for doctors to say, or lawyers to say that you have to rethink your artistic practice, so I just thought that was, but let's go to now, because we've talked about, because sort of your proof of concept of this idea, of like, it's sort of, you put your money in a sense where your mouth is with advocacy and really respecting the artists. And so let's talk about your proof of concept, which really begins with Heartland Sings.
It does. Well, let's just say that I've put a lot of my creative energy to creating ways that we can exist given all the facts that we've discussed, whether it's underpay or difficulty understanding nonprofits versus a profit and all of that. I mean, you just have to take things the way they are and do your best, right? And being a creative and somebody who's entrepreneurial in thinking, and just I'm an idea generator, I've come up with ways to overcome those problems.
Okay.
And so starting Heartland was one, to overcome a justice issue, a problem, and then which led to another issue, and then eventually led to the concept of maybe having a full-time company where we've got career artists here operating a studio and performing and actually working the entertainment field, so that we could maybe generate extra income to pay for those additional services that we want to provide in the community, just like all of our.
But you also had to pivot into thinking about, because you wanted to pay, you have 5, but you really wanted 8 professional singers. But it's not that you couldn't afford them; it's that you couldn't find them. But you also had to pivot in order to not only pay them for what their performance is,
every single time.
So, but then you also had to figure out how to create programming. So you turned to doing where we sort of talked about schools not having it. So. 30. You were saying to me that a professional artist in the Heartland Sings, so 30% of their time is really either giving lessons or doing educational efforts, and then 70% of their time is the practicing and performing. But you had to have both parts in order for them to really be a professional. So a good part of Heartland Sings' efforts is also doing in-school programs.
Well, the whole focus of the company has been on how do we succeed. And we cannot succeed as well. I mean, there are ways to succeed in business, right? And one is to be so focused on one thing that people know you for one thing, right? And that you just simply thrust into the marketplace with that one thing, okay? So that is one way. That's sort of a very direct pencil approach to a target.
It's very narrow.
It's narrow, right. But in a community like Fort Wayne, narrow focus is hard to get your feet off the ground, right? So if you just focused on one thing, that isn't necessary. Businesses that succeed do have sort of a focal point, but they have multiple sales channels.
Right, it's like you have your bullseye, and then you have to have the spokes, and so that you create a wheel which moves your business forward.
What moves a business forward? It happens to be money, right? So, so a nonprofit, if you can imagine, clockwise, is that clockwise?
Yeah.
Clockwise, a nonprofit works counterclockwise.
Right, okay.
Because the only way they can do anything is to propose something that they have not yet funded, and then get people to give money.
And not yet proven.
Well, it's never proven because you can usually only afford to do it once. So you don't have a chance to roll out something that could actually have some longevity. So you do this and you keep going, and you're sort of working the engine backwards, and it takes more time. That's why it's taken us 25 years to get where we are, because we are a nonprofit. But if you start churning it the for-profit way,
so that it really
that's
moves.
right. You actually get your investment, and you put your investment to work, and you build something that people want to go to.
Right.
And that's when things work better. So, but it takes a great amount of capital to start off, right? And nonprofits don't usually have that great amount of capital. We have been very lucky because of the presentation of ideas and getting out there, and then we just somehow struck the right hearts of folks to help us.
Well, and also I would say, as we've proven a little in our conversation, there's also good leadership of this entity.
And I don't discount that somehow my personality or something that I've done has given people a trust. I do say in Fort Wayne, if you're here long enough, people do trust you.
Right.
And as long as you hold that trust well.
Well, that's what you say is part of great artistry is the kindness and honesty, and that's what you say is all part of great artistry.
Well, I think that's just good
people. But yes,
good people, because I know a lot of great artists that aren't so honest and aren't so somebody I don't necessarily want to hang out with.
Okay, so then you really looked at for the Heartland Sings, and you, in addition, then you start to do the not only offering lessons at Heartland Sings, but then the school programs, right?
And so as the business, we knew that in order to make the case to bring somebody full time, it either had to be the pencil approach where we just did one thing, and that's what we focused on. And I could see my investment from the start just get sucked away because we had no plans for income for the first couple of years. And that's how businesses work. You build it with, you build the product and then you sell it, right?
Right. Well, that's why it's called cash flow.
That's right.
Out.
Exactly.
It's got to be a reciprocal relationship.
So the broad-based approach was much better because it slowed the decline of what we needed from our investment, and actually saw some income coming in. So that's why do the lessons and do this and all that. Now, what we found was we didn't have a building. For most of the time, this company started in my basement, then it moved to St. Francis. We had a great relationship there, still have a good relationship with them. But we needed our own place.
Right, well, because
so we
you
could
need
have
a
our
place.
studios.
I mean, you need a gathering place, you need a...
Right,
yeah.
and we eventually got that. So our whole practice has been analyze the issue, do your best, and pivot as quickly as you can to meet the what's actually
but
holding
it's also
you back.
It's not also just pivoting. It's also looking at what you have and looking at how you can. I always say it's like I report it once and I write it many, so that I use it in different, and I can sell different stories that come out of that. So, but one of the things that you also looked at was you said, okay, we've got this talent base. You and your professional singers, right?
That was the plan.
That was but then you looked at that, right? You put the talent base together, but then talk about how you didn't. You also realized, yes, build it and they will come will be one, but then you also said, we're going to take our building and we're going to create a production company and offer that beyond our city limits. So talk about how that approach to from Heartland Sings came out that this is really your for-profit is Heartland Productions.
Right. Okay, so we got started. It's a little over 5 years ago. We're getting close to 6 years, which is just amazing.
Of this strategy.
Of this strategy, where we went full time. And when we brought in the first wave of professionals to work for us, we began to realize that the regional marketplace was quite formidable to at least to get information out to them. And we learned that what we were known for in Fort Wayne, nobody knew us outside. So, you have to kind of look at what that means for your brand and everything. And there are marketplaces. We would go to a national market or regional marketplace and sell what we were doing. Everybody loved everything, but they just generally just didn't really talk to us. And so we learned two things. First of all, it takes time in the marketplace for them to get to know you.
Right.
And the other is that how you name yourself in the marketplace makes a huge difference.
Branding and positioning.
Branding and positioning. So, well, I don't have a business degree. I had to learn this.
I know you, yeah.
Yeah. So now I have it. I've learned it in the School of Hard Knocks.
Right.
So we learned by the third time in the marketplace that the brand that we went to the marketplace needed to change, and that's when we created Heartland Productions. So our plan at the time was in the regional marketplace, which we were just before COVID, we had, a number, we had finally hit the mark where we
Right.
were getting concerts, and we were scheduled from here to Arkansas. I mean, we're just all over the place. And of course, that just went right down the toilet with COVID. Well, at least it's been postponed,
Right.
so it hasn't all gone away.
Right.
But we'll talk about that. So we created the production company, which gave us more of a for-profit front, right? It's still a nonprofit, right? It's a DBA for Heartland Sings.
Right.
Okay, so it's the same logo. Everything just instead of Heartland Sings, it just says Heartland
Right.
Productions,
But
it gives us
that cachet. It gives that gravitas that this is a
Right.
profession. This is an organization.
How you
It's
brand
not
yourself
just
gets
it's
the
branding
conversation.
and branding
Right.
and positioning.
So that started the conversation in the marketplace.
Okay.
All right. So COVID hit,
Right.
and so because we're just so used to pivoting, we began to look at ways that we could stay employed.
So let's talk about-
my first energy was, I said to my staff, it looks like everybody's shutting down. All of the venues across the country, at least 24 months. And that's not so far
Right.
off the mark, right?
Right.
And so what are we going to do? Because our cash position was such, I said, I can keep you employed through December of 2020 if we do nothing. And I'll do that. I'm not sending anybody home because I know that would be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, but if you value this job and you want to see it succeed, let's come up. We have time. We had a few weeks where we were just working from home. So we have some time to come up with some new, innovative ways to do our business.
Right.
And that's what we did. So look, I had a team of creatives. That's what they did.
So the first thing you did was you looked at the use of technology.
We found technology and how are we going to do our school programs? That is, no educational contract is lucrative, believe me.
Right.
But it was income, and the kids were counting on us. So how did we, how were we
And
going
what
to
you
deliver?
realized was the amount of time you were spending just traveling.
Yeah.
And then
well,
a lot of
there was a lot that came out of the
Right.
pivot.
Right.
So we also knew that we had our performances. How were we going to perform when we couldn't get people together? And venues are expensive. You buy a venue and you can only seat 20% of the house. You can't. It's not worth it. So we invested a lot in technological innovations like live streaming, video, a lot of video production, and putting our lessons online.
Right.
And
And
in
also
fact,
learning to
teaching
standardize like a curriculum, and so that kids could watch a video,
Right.
and then they could
Right. All of that's been done over the course of this past year, all the while. And so we've not had a moment's rest. We really have, we've tried to take care of ourselves, but at the same time we realize, and see, this is the difference between a company that knows that their bottom line is dependent on income from doing what we do,
Right.
artistry, and some delivery of services that philanthropists will support, and that you get very focused, right? So there's not a single person on my staff, myself included, who does not see every day as an opportunity to use the resources that have been given to us.
Right.
And use them so well as to get a lot of return from that. And that's what we did.
Okay.
So we spent a lot of money on R&D.
Right.
Right? And here's the thing, even though we did receive some support from the government from PPP in the first time around, we're not going to get another dollar because we were so successful in our R&D that we've been operating pretty well.
Right.
And so, it's just going to have to go to those that need
Right.
it more than us,
And then
right?
you also found, like you and I talked about this because you really looked at technology, and one of the things I said to you and we talked about was the fact that everybody's now wanting to do podcasts and they're creating their own live streams.
Right.
And so, but one of the things is that, most of the companies that will help you with that, they talk about creating the podcast and helping you with the content or getting your guests.
Yeah.
But they
We're talking
don't,
mechanics now.
but they don't focus on what's the most important thing, especially with a podcast, is that people have to enjoy listening to you.
Right.
And we've talked about that voice. So you actually now are even exploring creating voice coaching for podcasters. And
Right.
I'm your first student.
Right. That's right. You will be.
But so
and
you
it's-
really looked at how to monetize, and you really did it. It's not a bad word. Like
No, it is a bad word, and also this is a futuristic thing, right?
Right.
Like I would love to get another grant from the government or
Sure.
something, or from somebody, because we could always use that because it's helping us with research and
Right.
development.
We're not saying that you're not
this
looking
is
for
the
this, right.
kind of investment that we should have had from everybody along the way as an arts group, because we have proven that we are innovative
Right.
and that
You've
we have
proven it,
ideas.
right.
So we really don't need to go out and show stuff and then get the investment.
Right.
We need it up front.
So
we're not, not kind
Right.
of just sitting on
yeah,
ideas.
but you're not sitting on those laurels either, because in this
No.
R&D and looking at technology, you also realize that going forward, because of COVID and the impact, well, two things. One, that not everybody's going to go back to live, large events and venues, right?
Not in the near future.
And two, there is a big issue with millennials that they don't want to go to live events and be in large groups. They weren't leaving their couches before, or they don't want to. They want to stay within their neighborhood or whatever. So now you use technology, and you took this time for R&D, and you realized how you could pivot some of your programming. You could create new programming, and you could use that to benefit. And then also by freeing up the time that people don't have to travel and things. So then you really looked at you're sort of like a creative problem solver, because now you said to your team and to yourself, okay, what are we going to do? Because people aren't going to go back necessarily to these venues. So now what's your big, this is future, but this was a big.
Totally. Well, so there's a history to that too. So a year ago, we were having discussions about how to use technology to deliver our services, because we knew we'd have to do them safely, and the best way is through like Zoom and
Right,
other
live streaming,
through whatever. And we needed ways to not only to monetize it, but to pay our licenses.
Right.
Because we are ASCAP, BMI, CSAC,
Right.
all that. So we had that issue, but I also, an idea that had surfaced for me roughly 8 years ago, which was, how do we get to audiences that don't grace our concert halls, right? For whom that is such an anathema experience
Right,
to
or
them,
like,
or just they've never had the
Or
experience.
the majority of public school students who have never attended a live performance, be it a drama, a play, a musical.
Exactly.
Or
How do
people,
you get to them?
Or people who feel marginalized and they don't feel comfortable going to like the concert hall or to see the Philharmonic,
But economically, what about those folks who maybe don't have, for a weekend, a $15 to take per
Right.
person to go to see something
Right.
that they might like?
Right.
It's going to be easier for them to pay the $2 and download the song and just listen to it, right? So they're receiving their arts in very dynamic, different
Okay.
ways. But the issue is that live arts really are a lot better, by and large, than just through your headset. Those are good memory
Well, because that's
makers.
because it's a multi-sensory
And
experience.
I'm totally, exactly,
Okay.
I'm totally in that. So I was looking at getting to underserved audiences and audiences that needed to know about us. Because one of the hardest things about getting people, to advertise for weeks on end that
Right.
we've got a big concert and sell tickets as long as you can, is getting that narrow date on somebody's calendar when we all know that life happens, right?
Right.
And they can't always
Well, and
make
people
it.
don't like to plan things in advance. They don't want to buy
Well,
tickets.
and then now you've got, it's a hodgepodge, right?
right.
Some people think, well, I want
So
to take
okay,
it.
so
Well,
so
so
let's
you've
do
got
a big reveal.
Yeah, the big reveal is that I wanted to have some way to mobily move my group from place to place to place and to perform for them in such a way as that they could begin to develop relationships. And then when we advertise a concert, they could come to us.
Right, because
All right,
you're building
so
a following.
that needed a huge investment of capital, which
Okay.
I didn't even have the professional full time yet.
Okay.
So I said, that isn't going to work. So how are we going to do this? So COVID hits, and I'm thinking, we're not going to have venues to perform in at the time, I was predicting 3 years. I may not be off the mark there because we don't know where the variants are going to go, and
it's
vaccine
also people,
hesitancy.
and the venues may be open, but just because you build it doesn't
matter.
mean they're going to come.
But in this case, this is a unit that was conceived pre-COVID that could actually have an effect. So we have developed basically a self-contained, for safety purposes, an RV, a recreational vehicle, for those of you that don't know that will house our performers, and that it will have its onboard stage that we can bring out, set down all of the sound equipment.
And it's going to have everything you need, all the speakers, everything.
It's self-contained, so you don't have to go to any venue. You have everything ready to go, and you can perform for a crowd of 50 to 200, right? And effectively in a neighborhood or wherever we need to go.
Parking lot.
Right. So
anywhere.
as we've been talking, you're just going to park it and play,
Well,
right?
we're
Park
saying
and play.
it's parks the arts.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
right.
you're
Well,
really
that's-
literally bringing it
That's right.
to them and making it, and then they can make donations, and then they can buy your CDs or merchandise, and then you can just pack it up, and then you can. So
our goal is to get all over Allen County so people know who we are, and to entertain them and maybe get them to become a donor and maybe jump in, and when we actually can go to a venue or do something somewhere, they'll join us.
But knowing you as the innovative, creative entrepreneur, the plan also is that one, you could also through Heartland Sings be the sponsor for other performing groups or singing groups that may want to use your.
We can do that through the productions. Yeah, Heartland Productions.
But the other truth is that you're going to use this RV here for your proof of concept, because then the idea is that then other arts organizations or commissions can see what you've done, and then you can help them build this, and then they can take it out to their communities.
Right.
And
the idea has been in development for, obviously about 8 years, but more actively over the past year, so all the legal work has been
but the
done.
truth is, you bought the RV because I got to go in it.
That's right. So it's there ready to go, so that we can actually prove that this is a viable opportunity for others to do.
And the big kickoff is May 12th, right?
That's right.
And you're going to do that. And the best part also is now you literally can have performances at Heartland Sings at your building, and you're so that you really
anywhere.
But the point is you're really bringing them to you, and then they can see the facilities, and so.
Or we are coming to them.
Or you're coming to them.
So the studies have shown, even in Richard Florida's book, that most people spend the majority of their life within 3 miles of their home.
Oh no, it's very difficult to get people to go beyond 3 miles of where they live or 3 miles of where they work.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case, we can actually take the performance venue to them.
Right.
And only once in a while, it's like I feel like missionaries.
Right.
That's the way we work. We're going to go where the need is greatest, and then maybe when we actually do a major event someplace, that people will come.
But you're also not limited to being, because you don't have your own venue, that you're not limited, that you can only get the Embassy Theater this state, and you can only get this.
No, we do have our own venue.
But you
It's
right, exactly. So
you're
not beholden to what a venue could give you. So you're really, but that's a really very innovative, and I'm excited to see where you're going to park it.
Yep. Well, we're going to park it everywhere, and I will say that it is not an inexpensive prospect. But I think we've learned quite a bit, and the proof of concept will kind of refine everything so that anybody taking it on after us.
And there is a sense of, people are very with a grassroots, pass the hat. You'd be surprised, and then also you might find a donor that you didn't know, or people, and then like we said, then I would approach the RV industry, because look what you're doing for them. You're giving them a whole different, opportunity to use a recreational vehicle for professional purposes.
Right.
So
we've been very fortunate, I have to say, that even though these concepts come about, they do cost take some investment, and we've had several jump in. I know we had like the Adsit Foundation and the Backard Foundation, and
because you've proven your concepts before, so that people aren't thinking this is just a crazy idea. They know it's not. It's going to be a tangible, executable, and sustainable. idea, and that's
yeah.
to your credit
Well, I
for
think
sustaining
that's
for
why
25 years.
That's why they've invested in the
Right.
concept and helped us. But it is a crazy idea.
Yeah, but
so I
but
just have
don't
to
you
say
you have to be a little. It's the crazies of the world that.
Creatives maybe.
Right.
Creatives are a little bizarre anyway. But that's why I wanted to get back to that moniker that together we make art happen. That all of these great innovative ideas do take investment.
Right.
And we need philanthropists to start looking at their nonprofits as opportunities, not as begging bowl.
Right, and not that they're just giving it, but like you said, investing and
it
really
is an investment.
It's investment in our arts, in our community, in our everything that we've said.
Yeah, we have to do some serious investing. We're talking about an infrastructure, and artists are one of the most serious infrastructures that we can focus on for the improvement of our communities nationwide.
Well, we have to stop looking that arts and making money and are not
incompatible.
Incompatible.
Yeah,
exactly.
they are compatible. Well, necessary.
Right.
Yep.
So to show some compatibility, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. What is your favorite word?
Thank you.
What is your least favorite word?
That's 2 words.
That's okay.
That's all right.
What is your least favorite word? You could do thanks.
Oh, yeah, okay, thanks is fine.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, playing the piano. Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to elaborate on that because I've been telling some of my students of late that I said if I'd known how much fun it was going to be to play the piano that I'm having now, I would have totally practiced a lot more.
But then you probably may not have enjoyed it because I don't think it's only playing the piano. I think it's all the things you do surrounding that. And
Well, no, it's just like you would say when you look back, it's like if I had known, I would want it to have happened to me sooner.
Okay.
And really, maybe it's just life experience, but it's also playing experience.
Right.
So I think I've been playing pretty actively since I left DePaul University as a graduate, as a student, and that's been. Never mind, I won't tell you how long that's been. A long time.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Egomaniacs.
What's
that's 2 words.
That's 2, okay.
Two
well, we could just say egos.
Yeah,
See, I'm the editor. I'll just edit it for you.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
Well, I don't think I can limit it to 1 word.
What sound or noise do you love?
I like being outside and just listening to just nature.
What sound or noise do you hate?
I don't know that I have one. Let's just say a piano that's out of tune.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think I could have been a good corporate exec. I think I could have been a president of a major company.
Well, you are the president of a major entity.
Well, it's not a major company. It's a company. I am president, but I think I could have done that easily in any company.
What profession would you not like to do?
I think there's not a single job I wouldn't care to do. And I say this because I think all work, no matter what it is, and I've done a lot of different jobs, right? Because hey, the arts, that's the way it is. I've done everything from retail to waiting tables to cleaning toilets. I mean, I've done it all. And it's all, for me, it's all a means to an end. And it's decent, it's humble,
So it's the value of work.
Yeah, even right now, I'm already planning for my retirement day because I'm 60. So how
You're
much
not
longer?
retired.
No, not anytime soon, but I am, at some point that'll happen. And I tell my staff today that I'm just bucking to be the janitor at Heartland Sings. And
you just want them to tell you when you can't tell that the piano's out of tune anymore.
Well, there's something a little bit more there. The reason I'm okay to be the janitor at Heartland Sings is because I know how much an aesthetically beautiful environment feeds them to do their best work. And so I would be perfectly happy to be the lowest on the totem pole, vacuuming and dusting and keeping the place clean. I'd be happy to do that.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
What I'm doing for Heartland Sings, and this
for
is
the arts
in Fort Wayne. Yeah, I'm proud of what I've done here.
Well, you should be.
I've done a lot.
Yeah. Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Living or dead? I think I'd like to have a conversation with either Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, because or any of our largest, most wealthiest people on the planet. And I shudder to think what might happen if I had a conversation with some of our social media folks, because I think it would probably end in a wrestling match. Because I just think there's so much there that they could do better by everybody.
How would you like to die?
Gosh, I'd like to, I don't know. I've been thinking about that. Peacefully.
Okay.
But that's hardly it. I think I'd rather do my funeral beforehand so I could see who shows up.
And then, right, they'll see who your real friends are.
The real question is, what do I want to do with my ashes? And I've long joked that I said I'd like to take my ashes and divide them into two parts, and some of them to go to the yards of folks who dismissed me, and which I really don't hold a grudge with that. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
But to just sprinkle in so I can push up weeds on their lawn, and then the other to line somebody's litter box, because I love cats, and
That could be a good thing.
it could be a good thing. I don't know.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well done.
Well, I hope that you continue making music for us and pushing for the arts and the importance that they play in all our lives. So, and I'm excited for the Perks the Arts with the vocal performance. And it's I'm really excited because I think it's going to really. I mean, you're solving a need, and you're going to the people. So
well, and I probably need to say that the biggest thing that I leave this day with you in this conversation is to say that I'm in a complete state of gratitude for what opportunities and what people have helped me do in Fort Wayne. Even though not everybody's agreed with me, I love them too.
But I would also say to you right now, you just need to take a bow. So
that's all I'm going to do.
Okay.
Thanks.
And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week, when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.